The governor's daughter was thrown into the hands of an Apache warrior like a shattered object left to wither beneath the burning sands and the hateful stares of an entire village. But that man was the only one left who still knew what compassion meant. If that gave you chills, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that hit deep. Stay tuned, what happens next will break you. I don't remember the exact moment they took me, just the hard thump of boots against stone and the sharp wind slicing through silence like the world itself had paused to hold its breath. I came to in the back of a truck sitting on a grimy metal bench, my wrists bound and my mouth coated with the dry dust of the earth. Fever ran through me, and my bones felt so close to the surface of my skin, it was like even my soul had no place left to hide. But I could still hear, and what I heard made my entire body freeze. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Honestly, I don't think I even remembered how to do that anymore. I just lay there, eyes fixed on the sky, while the sunlight burned its way into me. The heat of it seemed to feed off my weakness. That's how I arrived, like something infected, a living sickness delivered to the center of the Apache village of Saquam, north of what's now the state of Arizona. The soldiers dumped me there like they were tossing away a fish too rotten to keep. I was the daughter of Governor Samuel Esteban Montaluna, and they left me behind like some twisted gift to a people who didn't ask for me, who didn't want me. Figures emerged from the fields. The women covered their faces. The children ran and hid. The men stood still, watching, suspicious. My skin scorched by the sun, my tangled hair, my hollow eyes, they made me look more like a walking corpse than a living person. I stood there shaking in the center of a circle of silent stares. Then an old man with beads around his head stepped forward. His eyes scanned me like he was searching for a sign, maybe an answer, maybe a punishment. But no one explained anything. No one came closer. I caught bits of murmured words I couldn't understand. Others just faded away. Why? Why would my own father send me here like this? What had I done to deserve it? The questions burned in me, but they never made it to my mouth. I'd stopped feeling hunger days ago, and still something about this place was colder than any dungeon or blade I'd ever known in the palace. Here, I wasn't even a prisoner or a victim. I was nothing. When night fell, they took me to a hide tent, dark with no fire, no bedding, no voice to greet me. The only thing that broke the silence was the dry sound of footsteps. And through that noise, I heard Tacoma for the first time. He was massive with eyes like stone. But for a moment, I couldn't look away. In that instant, I didn't see anger or words, just something buried, something he was trying to keep hidden. He left something at the flap of the tent, a small piece of cornbread, and walked off. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. My stomach begged for it, but my soul refused. I didn't want anything from this place. I just wanted to vanish. The next day, I woke up the same way, alive but hollow. The bread was still there untouched, and across the open space between the tents, the stares had shifted. Not curious anymore, but full of contempt, like my very existence offended the land itself. And maybe, just maybe, the night after that, I wasn't meant to wake up again. The night light robbed me of reason. No one there spoke of what had happened before I arrived, not even Tacoma. And if someone did know, maybe not even the desert gods could stand to remember. That night, after the central fire in the village burned down, the elders gathered. There were no women there, no young people. Just the old ones, the ones carved from the bones of the earth. That night, after the flames had died in the center of the village, the elders gathered. No women, no youth were allowed near the circle of stars, where only the gravest matters were spoken aloud. but I listened hidden in the darkness outside my shelter, my heart thudding like it might ignite from the heat as they whispered. But I heard enough to understand one thing that mattered most. They didn't know what to do with me. The governor made us an impossible offer, said a man named Shaska. He spoke slowly with the kind of weight that only comes from being the keeper of memory. But he honored it, said another younger voice tight with tension. He gave us something that held no value for him. He gave us his daughter. The silence that followed hit like a thunderclap. Then a woman wearing green, her neck hung with beads and teeth, broke it. It's a sign. When you give your own flesh and blood to the desert, the spirits awaken. Some cried out. Others held each other in fear. One voice hesitated. This isn't an offering. It's a curse. Tacoma's name came up, and in that instant the entire circle seemed to still. He'll pay for breaking his vows, one of them said, but he'll watch over her. His silence will be the thread that holds this fragile web together. Tacoma. I had no idea what he had done. All I knew was that in some ancient, cruel way, we were now bound two beasts tangled in one cursed body. The next morning, the whispers began again. The women clutched their children as if shielding them from a storm. The young stared at me like I was some walking plague. One little boy actually cried when he saw me. His mother dragged him away and cursed in a language I didn't recognize. The village felt torn about my presence. Some whispered that I brought misfortune, others claimed I carried toxic spirits. But no matter what they believed, they all avoided me. All except Tacoma. He showed up every day, always at the same time, always with the same quiet expression. He would leave something just outside the entrance of my tent. A piece of fresh fish, a cooked root, sometimes a desert flower, and walk away without ever looking back. And still, I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it. It felt like accepting even the smallest thing meant admitting I was still alive, and I didn't want to be. Then one night, as the sky turned a dark shade like scorched blood, I heard something unfamiliar, a song. It floated from far off, weaving between the rocks and tents. It was Tacoma's voice singing a melody that sounded ancient, mournful, almost sacred. He stood alone on a nearby hill, eyes closed, hands raised to the sky. I watched from the shadows hidden from a distance, and in that moment I realized he wasn't just my captor or my guardian. He was a prisoner too. Trapped by a mistake I still didn't understand, but one that somehow bound the two of us together. I slipped back into my shelter before he could see me, and for the first time I reached for the piece of fish he had left that morning. I ate it slowly, ashamed but starving. Starving for something that went far beyond food. His name started to echo around the village more than mine. Tacoma. Always spoken with quiet respect, but also with unease. With every step he took through the village, heads turned. No one confronted him directly, but the glances made it clear he had done something they hadn't forgotten. In Apache culture, silence can speak louder than words, and Tacoma was a man of silences. One morning, Elder Chaska came to my shelter. It was the first time anyone had spoken to me since I arrived. "You don't belong here," he said, his Spanish heavily accented. "But you are here, and you will live. Tacoma will watch over you, and you won't ask questions." I could feel the weight of it. My body was too worn down to argue, but my thoughts had already begun to stir. That afternoon, Tacoma entered my tent for the first time. He didn't say a word. He just sat nearby, keeping his distance. He placed a bowl of water and a small cloth on the ground, then gently began cleaning the skin on my arms, raw and cracked from the heat. That's when I noticed the wounds on his back, two long, deep scars. Punishment. Then he finally spoke to me. They chose me because they think I don't feel anything anymore. His voice was low and rough, like it was carrying old pain. Do you feel? I asked him. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, really looked, and the intensity of it made me turn away. Over time, I learned more. Bits and pieces. He had once saved a wounded white man defying a sacred village order. The man had trespassed on protected land. Tacoma, moved by compassion, hid him and nursed him back to health. But the price was unbearable. 2 of Tacoma's own sons were caught and killed by armed patrols during the stranger's escape. For that, Tacoma was whipped, stripped of his right to lead hunts, forbidden from ever taking part in warrior rituals again. He survived, but his pride had been ripped from him. And now, as if that hadn't been enough, they gave him me, like I was one more burden only he could carry. But no one knew the truth. We were both walking mistakes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat watching his hands as he slept outside the tent. Large, warm hands. They were the only anchors I had left in the world. He had been punished for showing mercy, and I for loving someone I never should have. Yes, Caleb. The name still burned somewhere inside me. But now there was another name that burned differently. Tacoma. And the strange part was, the more I uncovered about him, the more I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was still a part of me worth saving. Time moved differently there. The sun rose slow but burned like judgment. Nights were hushed, broken only by crickets and far-off drums. Through the cracks in the tent, I saw others living, eating, laughing, walking barefoot across the warm ground like they belonged. But I never did. The food kept coming. Grilled fish, boiled roots, coarse pieces of bread, all carefully left beside my shelter, always from Tacoma. But I couldn't bring myself to eat. It was as if my body refused anything this world offered, like every bite would betray the last piece of me that still held on. He never asked questions, never insisted, just left what he brought and walked away. On the 3rd day, alongside the food, there was a flower, small, bright, with one petal broken. I didn't touch it, but I didn't throw it away either. The women of the village had started to look at me differently, not with pity, but with something between fear and scorn. One of the elder women, her skin as red as dry bark, passed by and muttered something. Tacoma heard her, and for the first time raised his voice at someone. I didn't understand what he said, but I felt the shift. The way the children went silent. The way the adults stopped what they were doing. After that, no one came close again. I became the woman who didn't eat the one who didn't speak, the one who seemed already dead, but kept on breathing anyway. Sometimes in the early hours of morning, I'd hear soft laughter outside. It was laughter, quick words in Apache followed by bursts of chuckling. I didn't need to understand the language. The tone said enough. One night I heard a child crying. The mother pulled them away immediately, her voice tight with panic as she pointed in my direction. If you don't sleep, she'll take you. I had become a ghost among the living. Tacoma kept his distance, still silent, but I could always feel when he was near. The air would grow heavier, the quiet more intense. Sometimes I'd see him run his hand through his hair, like he was exhausted by the burden of having to carry the nightmare that was me. Then one day, I collapsed. It happened without warning. I stood up to leave the tent, and the ground gave out from under me. My feet buckled. My mouth was dry. My skin was on fire. The world went black in a flash that felt like forever. When I woke up, I felt warm leaves pressed against my chest. Someone was singing low, steady, like a prayer drifting over my skin. It was Tacoma. He had carried me to a high, isolated place. There, the wind moved differently, crisper, clearer. He sat beside me with his eyes closed like he was offering some unspoken apology to the gods. I looked at him, weak, dazed, lost, and then I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. Why? He opened his eyes and looked straight at me. What he said next I'll never forget, because you're not finished yet. Then he handed me a cup of water, and for the first time, I took it. I drank slowly, afraid, but I drank. And for a brief moment, the world stopped spinning. That night, when Tacoma brought me back to the village, something inside me broke. I don't know if it was the fever, the fear, or that name that haunted me every day alongside my shame. Caleb. I collapsed into Tacoma's arms. I started screaming, howling like the desert had gotten inside me and was ripping me apart from within. I cried out, "See, Caleb!" But Tacoma didn't stop me or tell me to be quiet. He just held me tighter against his warm chest while my body shook and the ground around me seemed to dissolve like rain. I cried until I shattered. It was like my soul was clawing its way out of my throat, everything I had been holding in for so long, pouring out in one long, unrelenting scream. He carried me back to the top of the mountain again, but this time he wrapped me in dark blankets and warm leaves like a cocoon. My eyes barely opened, but I could smell the earth, the soil beneath me, and the burning wood of a nearby tree. And there is where it rained, not from the sky, but from inside me. For the first time, I let the pain in. Caleb, his voice, his face, that betrayal. I had given him everything, my body, my name, my loyalty, and he gave me to my father like I was a mess someone else had to clean up. Tacoma began humming a low, deep melody that made the ground itself seem to hum. I didn't understand the words, but I knew what they meant. It was a farewell, and maybe without realizing it, that was the moment I began to let go of Caleb. When the fever passed and the sky began to lighten, I opened my eyes. Tacoma was sitting with his back to me, staring out at the horizon, quiet as always. But something had shifted. His pain had risen with mine. I sat up slowly. My arms were heavy, but for the first time in months, my head felt lighter. I looked at him and finally had the courage to meet his eyes. "Why are you helping me?" I asked softly. He turned his face slightly. His gaze held no anger, no words, only understanding. "Because when I saw you, I saw my own pain." I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. He turned back toward the horizon. "The desert doesn't kill the ones who are wounded. It kills the ones who lie about their pain." I heard that, and for the first time I wasn't afraid. Not because I was clean or healed or whole, but because he didn't look at me like I was broken. He looked at me like someone who understood. As we made our way down the mountain, Tacoma offered me his hand. I hesitated, but then I took it and walked beside him, fragile but standing. After that night, something changed between us. Not in any way you could see. The villagers still looked at me with fear. Some children still hid when I passed. The women still moved away. But something inside me had started breathing again. I returned to my tent with slow but steady steps. I began to eat just enough to stay upright. Not because I was hungry. I still didn't feel hunger. It was a choice, a silent one. Tacoma still came every day, always with something in his hands. Sometimes he just left it and walked away. But gradually, he started to stay. He'd sit by the entrance of the tent, saying little, almost nothing. And that's when I noticed something strange. He spoke the most when he was silent. One day, he told me about his mother. We were sitting side by side in front of a cold fire pit surrounded by stones. The sky was painted orange. The village was calm. I was working slowly through a pouch of cooked meat with shaky hands. He stared into the fire like he was seeing the past inside the flames. "My mother died when I was born," he said. "She was white. She left the city and came to the desert with my father. No one forgave her for it." I looked at him stunned. He had never spoken of his mother before, never mentioned the city. They buried her far away. They didn't even allow her body near the village. Tacoma traced a scar on his forearm with his fingers. The skin there was darker, drier. "They say I'm half-blood, a breathing mistake. I've never belonged neither here nor with the whites." The way he said it without bitterness, without self-pity, just acceptance, put a knot in my throat. I swallowed hard but couldn't get anything down. "Then why didn't you leave?" I asked. He looked at me for the first time that night, eyes weathered by sun and pain. "Because the desert knows me, and I know it. Out here, at least, I know where the stones will break you." I couldn't respond. I just let a tear slip down my cheek and looked away. Minutes later, still staring into the fire, I whispered, "You're the first person who's never apologized for me." He closed his eyes. That was it. But in that gesture, I understood everything. For the first time in months, someone saw me not as a victim, not as a threat, but as someone emptied out, even if I was still broken. The next day, he took me to the riverbank. I sat on a rock, watching the water move, washing time away. He stayed nearby, close enough to feel present, but far enough to give me space, to give me choice. And there alone, I began to wash my arms, my feet, my face. And when I looked at my reflection in the stream for the first time, I didn't hate what I saw. It started subtly, like the slow drizzle after a long drought. The desert began to shift, and so did I. The rains came not often, but enough to crack open the hardened earth and let tiny flowers bloom through the broken soil. The village wore a soft, fragile green that felt like a miracle. The wind wasn't just sharp anymore, it started to carry the scent of life. And my body slowly started to awaken. I still ate little, but this time I wanted to. I stretched myself open again like someone learning how to live all over. My skin changed its tone. My hands steadied. My hair, once matted and dull, began to glint under the sunlight. At first, the women spoke to me out of obligation, but eventually curiosity drew them in. I learned to weave with them simple, tight, strong patterns. We made clothing fans. They laughed among themselves. Not at me, but they no longer pretended I wasn't there. Later, they showed me how to boil corn, how to press tortillas over flat stones heated by fire. It wasn't easy. I burned my fingers, misjudged the water, but from a distance I saw Tacoma watching the corner of his mouth almost curling into a smile. One day, a small girl handed me a necklace made of red seeds. That was it. She placed it in my hand and ran off. But it felt like the desert itself had embraced me. I started to smile a little at first, then more. And for the first time, the children laughed around me without fear. The day I danced with them in the sand, I realized my feet were no longer buried in the ground. I wasn't a dead fish in this village anymore. And Tacoma, Tacoma. He remained steady, quiet, always watching. But his gaze had changed. It wasn't just protective. It was longing, respectful desire. admiration. One afternoon after we came back from the river, he handed me a polished stone carved into the shape of a woman. Simple, beautiful. Her round chest symbolized fertility renewal. "Is this you?" he asked. I was speechless. The gift felt heavier than gold in my hand. "But I'm still broken," I whispered. "No," he said, "you're fresh clay now. You can take any form." He said it without trying to convince me, just calmly showing me how he saw me. He smiled, and for the first time I felt something warm inside the place where there had only been pain. It was desire, not just physical, but the kind that comes from the soul, the ache to be seen through someone else's eyes. And I was seen in his. That night I sat on the edge of the dogskin blanket, awake but calm. My body was no longer a battleground. It was something fertile, and for the first time in a long time I closed my eyes in peace, but with burning tears. The hottest night of the summer spread across the desert like a sheet of fire. Even the rocks had nowhere to hide from the heat. The sky was clear, and the stars burst above like each one had something urgent to say. I couldn't sleep. As I walked back through the camp, I felt something new in my body. It wasn't fear or fever. It was something that had been building quietly for days, something I had tried to ignore but now burned across my skin like dry leaves catching fire. My heart wasn't just beating, it was beating for him. I rose silently. My feet crossed the warm ground with purpose. I moved through the village like a living shadow. No one stirred. Only the wind whispered between the tents, carrying cold and secrets. When I reached his tent, I stopped. I stood there with my hand hovering near the flap, not knocking, not calling, just waiting. But I knew. He was awake too. The canvas shifted. Tacoma was sitting upright, eyes already open like he'd known I was coming. He didn't speak, and I didn't ask to enter. The tent smelled of wood, soil, and skin. The fire outside cast his silhouette from behind, strong, still watchful. I stood before him, trembling not from fear, but nerves awareness. I stood there shaking not with fear, but with anticipation, with longing. He rose slowly, tall, warm, his eyes locked on mine. There was nothing aggressive about him, no sound, no rush, but his gaze, it was a world unto itself, and in that world, everything called to me. I took one step, then another. He didn't move, just waited as if my decision were sacred. And it was. I placed both hands gently on his face. His soft hair fell over his shoulders. He held my arms firmly but gently, like I was something valuable, even after everything. Then it happened. We kissed. But it wasn't just a kiss. It was a surrender, a bridge built between two sorrows. Our mouths met like they'd been searching for each other for years. His hands moved slowly to my back, holding me with quiet urgency, pulling our bodies together in silence. Neither of us spoke, but our bodies said everything. The desert heat poured into the tent, but inside it was even warmer. We undressed each other slowly. Every touch was an apology for the other's pain. Every movement of his hands felt like a whispered plea. I'm here. And when he laid me on my back and came over me, I wasn't reborn as the governor's daughter or as a rejected woman, but as something else, someone stripped down, alive, wanted. We made love slowly, like people who know they're stepping into something that will never be repeated. And in his eyes, Somewhere between one sunrise and the next, I saw something sacred respect. That night the world paused. It stopped to witness two weary hearts finding each other. It stood still to give us one moment of peace. And when I woke up hours later with my head resting against his chest, the sun hadn't yet risen, but I could feel light inside me. Life in the village no longer felt like punishment. I rose early, washed my face in the river, shared breakfast with the other women, smiled with the children, picked wildflowers with the youngest girls. Tacoma and I didn't speak of what happened between us, but it was as though the desert already knew. The looks on our faces had changed. The whispers faded. Some even smiled as I passed. Tacoma walked beside me by the fire, not as a protector, but as an equal. But the city never forgets. On the coldest morning of that month, the village woke to the arrival of a messenger. He came running dust on his pants shoes worn from travel. A dark emblem burned onto his back, the symbol of Governor Monteluna. My father. My body went cold the instant I saw it. He handed a sealed envelope to Elder Chaska. Tacoma stood beside me as the old man opened the letter and read its contents. Neither of them looked at me, but I could already feel the nightmare settling in. When they finished reading, Chaska called me forward. Lisa, your father demands your immediate return to the city. I felt like the ground had fallen from beneath my chest. My world unraveled. Why, I asked. My voice was thin but steady. Tacoma lowered his head. Chaska hesitated but answered. He knows you're alive, that you're different now, healthy, beautiful. The word beautiful made me sick. A wealthy man, a close friend of your father's, saw your image. He wants to marry you. He wants to parade you around society. He says he forgives you. Forgives me like I had done something wrong. Tacoma said nothing, not a single word. He just stared at the ground still. I took a deep breath, tears pooling in my eyes. I'm not going back, I said. That's not up to you, the messenger replied. You belong to your father. You are now a promised alliance. Then Tacoma lifted his face. I had never seen that expression on him before. Cold, steady, dangerous. She belongs to no one, he said in Spanish, his voice sharp enough to sting. The messenger reached for his weapon. The village warriors stepped in. The air was thick with tension, but Chaska stepped between them. This isn't how blood ties are resolved, he said. Tacoma led me back to my shelter. Each step felt like the world was crumbling beneath me. My body ached more than it did when I was nothing but skin and bones. They want to lock me up again, I said, sitting down, not looking at him. I know. You healed me. I continued, my voice cracking. And now they want to turn me into a showpiece. Tacoma said nothing, and that silence hurt more than any answer. Say something, I begged. Anything. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was fear. If I fight for you, he said, the village will turn against me. And if I don't, my heart will break. I cried in front of him like a child, and for the first time I didn't know what to do because now the choice itself was tearing us apart. That morning the sky turned heavy with snow. The wind carried omens whispering something ancient. The village, once filled with quiet peace, fell completely silent. No one said a word, but everyone knew. I was going to be taken. The elders were divided. Some said I should remain, that breaking the governor's word would dishonor the village. Others believed that Tacoma, by being with me, had severed his final tie to the mistake of his past, and now with love in his chest, he was no longer thinking clearly. But what no one understood was that this wasn't a nightmare, much less a punishment. When the city's men arrived, armed, carrying signed orders, not even the village warriors dared to intervene. The governor's command carried more weight than the blood of a woman no one had wanted just months before. They took me by force, bound my hands. Tacoma appeared in the center of the village. His arms were tight against his sides, his face hard, his eyes burning. "Don't touch her," one soldier warned. But it was already too late. They tore open my cloak like I was nothing more than lost property. The women of the village wept, some from fear, others from shame. But I didn't cry, not when they threw me onto the animal's back, not when the sun beat against my skin the way it did on the day I first arrived. I only cried when I looked up and saw Tacoma staring at me, his hands pressed to his head as if he had broken his own heart and left it there in the dust. But the desert knew me, and I knew it. That very night, arms bruised and feet bloodied, I ran, alone, no food, no direction. I scraped over rocks, tore my skin on thorns, was stung by insects. My clothes shredded, my shoes split open. I collapsed by the side of the road, my hands buried in the dirt, my head against the earth, too weak to go on. And then I felt arms around me, strong, warm, steady. It was Tacoma. He had found me even though I didn't know where I was going, because my scent, my pain, my absence called louder than the wind. He carried me back to the village. The elders were speechless. No one said anything. Chaska, the oldest among them, wept when he saw me. She came back to us, and we didn't know how to receive her, he said. That day, a new tent was raised, not for punishment, but for union. And on that land where once I was seen as a mistake, I was now blessed. More than a month later, a child was born, a daughter. The wind had carried in with her father's dark hair and her mother's shining eyes. The children named her Maya, which means respect. And when I watch her walk among the desert blooms, wildflowers dancing around her feet, I know it was all worth it, because I died once, but I was reborn from the love of a man who never once promised me forever.